This LOS is describe methods for measuring and modifying risk exposures and factors to consider in choosing among the methods. Measuring and modifying risks. Drivers. The basic drivers of risk arise from global and domestic macroeconomies, industries, and individual companies. Risk management can control some of this risk, but it cannot control all of it. For example, the risk manager of a company may be able to reduce the likelihood that his company will default, but he cannot control movements in interest rates. For the latter risk, he must accept that the interest rate volatility is a given and that he can only position the company to be able to ensure that its risk exposure is aligned with its objective and risk tolerance. In order to do so, he must first be able to measure the risk. Measuring and modifying risks. Metrics. The risk of a security may be better measured by its beta, a measure of the sensitivity of a security's return to the returns on the market portfolio. Beta measures relative risk, meaning how much market risk an asset contributes to a well-diversified portfolio. The sensitivity of the derivative price to a small change in the value of the underlying asset is called the delta. Large changes are captured by the concept of gamma. Some derivatives, such as options, are also sensitive to changes in the volatility of the underlying. This risk is captured by a concept called vega, which is a first-order measure of the change in the derivative price for a change in the volatility of the underlying. Duration is a measure of the interest rate sensitivity of a fixed income instrument. Measuring and modifying risks. Metrics. Value at risk, or VAR, is a measure of the size of the tail of the distribution of profits on a portfolio or for an entity. A VAR measure contains three elements: an amount stated in units of currency, a time period, and a probability. For example, assume a London bank determines that its VAR is £3 million at 5% for 1 day. This statement means that the bank expects to lose a minimum of £3 million in 1 day, 5% of the time. A quick practice question to check our understanding. The best definition of value at risk is A, the expected loss if a counterparty defaults, B, the maximum loss an organization would expect to incur over a holding period, or C, the minimum loss expected over a holding period at a certain percentage of the time. The correct answer is C. VAR measures a minimum loss expected over a holding period a certain percentage of the time. It is not an expected loss, nor does it reflect the maximum possible loss, which is the entire equity of the organization. Measuring and modifying risks. Methods of risk modification. Risk prevention and avoidance. One method of managing risk is taking steps to avoid it altogether, but avoiding risk may not be as simple as it appears. It is difficult to completely avoid risk, but more importantly, it is unclear that every risk should be completely avoided. Risk acceptance, self-insurance, and diversification. In many cases, from both a risk tolerance and a strategic standpoint, it makes sense to keep a risk exposure, but to do so in the most efficient manner possible. Self-insurance is the notion of bearing a risk that is considered undesirable, but too costly to eliminate by external means. In some cases, self-insuring simply means to bear the risk. In other cases, it may involve the establishment of a reserve to cover losses. Another form of accepting risk, but doing so in the most efficient manner possible, is diversification. Technically, it is a risk mitigation technique, but diversification and the efficient frontier are so central to modern portfolio analysis that capturing the full benefits of diversification seems the obvious thing for all organizations to pursue, a starting point at which other risk modification can be appended. Although diversification is one form of risk management, it is usually not effective if used in isolation. Risk transfer. Risk transfer is the process of passing on a risk to another party, often but not always in the form of an insurance policy. Insurance is a legal contract in which one party, the insurer, agrees to cover some percentage of a loss incurred by another party, the insured, from a specific event in return for the payment of a premium by the insured. Risk shifting. Whereas risk transfer refers to actions taken that pass the risk on to other parties, risk shifting relates to actions that change the distribution of risk outcomes. Risk transfer is often associated with insurance, whereas risk shifting generally involves derivatives as the risk modification vehicle. The principal device through which risk shifting is performed is a derivative. How to choose which method for modifying risk. Choosing which risk mitigation method to use, risk prevention and avoidance, self-insuring, risk transfer, or risk shifting, is a critical part of the risk management process. Fortunately, the methods are not mutually exclusive, and many organizations use all methods to some extent. No single method provides a clear-cut advantage over the others. As with all decisions, the trade-offs is one of costs versus benefits that are weighed in light of the risk tolerance of the organization or individual. We're going to finish this LOS with a quick practice question to check our understanding. The choice of risk modification method is based on A, minimizing risk at the lowest cost, B, maximizing returns at the lowest cost, or C, weighing costs versus benefits in light of the entity's risk tolerance. The correct answer is C. Among the risk modification methods of risk avoidance, risk acceptance, risk transfer, and risk shifting, none has a clear advantage. One must weigh benefits and costs in light of the firm's risk tolerance when choosing the method to use. And that's the last slide for this LOS. Thank you.